conducted pursuant to the provisions of California Government Code Section 549 to 53E, added by Assembly Bill 361, which allows the city to use teleconferencing and to provide the public an opportunity to address the committee via a call-in option or an internet-based service option during a proclaimed state of emergency. Excuse me. During the state of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic and in the interest of public health and safety, the committee members will be participating in the committee meeting via a virtual teleconference platform. Additionally, the committee is providing a virtual participation option for members of the public. I will go over the specifics of how to join the webinar and will give details on how the public can offer their public testimony. Today's committee meeting will be held virtually using the Zoom webinar platform. Members of the public can join the meeting by computer, tablet, or smartphone by accessing the link, which is listed on the meeting notice and agenda on the committee webpage. To join the Zoom webinar by telephone, please dial 1-669-254-5252. When prompted, input webinar ID 161-340-8303. This information is also available on the agenda. When the chair introduces the item you would like to comment on, you will raise your hand by either tapping the raise your hand button on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or by pressing *9 on your phone. You will be taken in the order in which you raise your hand. You may only speak once on a particular item. When I indicate it is your turn to speak, I will call you by your name as it appears in the Zoom webinar attendee list, or I will read out the last 4 digits of your phone number if you have called into the meeting. That is how you will know it is your turn to speak. If you have joined the webinar by computer, tablet, or smartphone, you will receive a pop-up notice to select to unmute your device. If you have called into the meeting by cell phone or landline, press *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. I will review these instructions briefly again when the public comment period on an item is open. Please wait until the item you wish to speak to has been called before raising your hand to speak. If you raise your hand during a non-comment period, your hand will be lowered. When you are announced as the next speaker, please unmute yourself and offer your comments. Also, please mute the volume on your TV or computer before you begin to speak.
Thanks, Chris. I will now call the Civic Center Revitalization Committee meeting of October 31st to order and call the roll. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and say present. Jamie Bradford is present. Lori Black. Bridget Brashear.
Present.
Betsy Brennan.
Present.
Julie Coker.
Present.
Julie Corrales. Steve Cushman.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Colleen Fitzsimons. Denise Garcia. Martha Gilmer. Alan Jin. Joel Hermosillo.
Present.
Donna Jones. I think you said she's in, right, Chris?
Looks like she's having audio
She did say present if you read her lips.
Okay, present. Thank you. Jennifer Luce. Jack McGrory.
Present.
And I think Jennifer joined too, right, Chris?
Can't see her right now.
Okay. Mark Nelson.
She just got here.
Bill Ponder. Stephen Russ, thank you, Bill. Stephen Russell's present. He's still on the public side, not on the panelist side. Dr. Vicky Shabazz. Tony Young.
Here.
Mike Zuquette.
Present.
And Jennifer Luce. Okay. Thank you. Your attendance has been noted and a quorum is present. I see you nodding.
Yes, correct.
Each committee member is attending virtually. Also in the virtual meeting is Chris McFadden, Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Christopher Ackerman Avila, Office of the Mayor, and Jay Goldstone, Chief Operating Officer for the next hour and 20 minutes. Now we'll move to the chair's report. I just really want to touch on the agendas. Well, first I want to say welcome to everybody and happy Halloween. And I'd like to just go over some of the agendas and the city council meeting that many of us attended. First on the agendas, just to recap, we've heard from HCD, as you all know, Jay Goldstone, and of course, received council input. Today, we're going to hear from the city's urban division and planning from Deputy Director Brian Schoenfish. Many of you had questions about the zoning uses in the Civic core. Any plans for changes there or updates, kind of the big picture for downtown and how the Civic core fits into it. So we're kind of looking at it from that angle. Looking ahead, we're going to hear from the Civic Theater, and also Jennifer Luce on our committee will also have a presentation about Civic Center's programming and public spaces. And Jennifer, maybe you can touch on that more during your working group update. But I'd really then like to get started kind of on a discussion on our draft recommendations. So if you feel there's information that we are missing and would like to have a presentation, please let me or staff know. I know one of the working groups started on a framework for us to consider as we gather information, and we'll also hear more about that later. I just lost my place. Oh, and if you haven't noticed, we did put the working group updates on our agenda today, and we'll have those going forward too. For the city council, thanks to all of those of you who could attend in person and could attend the tour. I think some of us listened online too. I don't know if you want to kind of show some hands to say if you were able to listen in or show up in person. I think we had a pretty good turnout, certainly in person. I couldn't obviously see who was online. But for those of you who weren't there, a lot of the focus was, of course, on housing and just city services, but also homelessness was a big topic. If you haven't seen the memo yet that the 3 council members sent us, please read it. It is on our website. You can access it there. It's pretty reflective of the comments from the entire council, but I'll just run through my notes really quick from the meeting so everyone's up to speed. And I kind of went one by one. The first one being Councilmember Whitburn, who represents this area. And he really focused on homelessness, even to the point of wanting to end homelessness, which is very ambitious, but I thought it was important to note his emphasis on that. He also talked about shelter beds and needing shelter beds, and of course, affordable housing. Monica Montgomery Stepp was the first to really focus on the loss of SRO units downtown. I don't think there's much, if any, left. She also mentioned RENA goals, for those of you who are familiar with that. And she mentioned Brian Schoenfish. Since you're on the call, you probably know this. I do not, but mentioned the adequate sites inventory map. She also, on the energy side, brought up focusing on zero emissions building, and really talked about kind of a balanced community and having a balanced community, and urged the city not to rush the process. Councilmember Campillo, he was one of, I should mention Councilmember Montgomery Stepp and Councilmember Campillo co-authored the memo along with Council President. He also, and they mentioned things that are in the memo, but he also mentioned homelessness. He brought up childcare on site. And he talked a little bit about the 101 ash conditions, and if it complicates it, then maybe we should consider leaving it out. Councilmember Von Wilpert talked about what were the Housing Commission needs, and really focused on what the needs were for employees working downtown, including parking, transit, and EV charging. She said, and someone else will say this later, but don't worry, or not worry, but don't be afraid, I guess, to push back on HCD on the non-contiguous 25% requirement, that we can always look to approaching the state or look at clarifying legislation. And she also mentioned, of course, the arts and the Civic Theater. Councilmember LaCavas made a point of saying he supported all 6 parcels in the NOA. And I'm glad Brian's on this call because he really got into kind of the current zoning. He was concerned that 40% of the I guess, building needed frontage, and he wanted to modify that. I was wondering what the current zoning requirements and processes to change it. He mentioned the 10,000 unit commitment. If you haven't seen that, the city and county just jointly held a council meeting and committed to building 10,000 units. And he was a little worried about staff capacity to pull off everything with everything already on their plate, because this is such a big negotiation and a big project. Member Kate also looked at what were the building requirements. He mentioned the PDO. He also wanted us to be aware of the public subsidy for affordable housing. So when developers are coming forward with their proposals, are they using kind of current tax credits and current advantages that are available instead of providing the affordable housing on site on their own? And he also said to be cautious of HCD responses. We may be able to modify with legislation or approaching the state, as this is obviously all new to everybody and evolving. Councilmember Campbell also talked about SROs and homelessness. I think we've covered that. And finally, the council president emphasized affordability, reducing homelessness, really like building a center building that improved or made city services better, because it's accessible, it's appropriate space for workers and for staff. He was looking towards a mixed income community and also on sustainable buildings. And the last thing he said, that when we consider other properties to take into account the housing yields. So that is kind of a big summary. That's a lot at you if you haven't heard it yet, but I thought it was important that I summarize what we all heard. I don't think we can take discussion or questions on this, but we certainly have committee comment later. So I think we can bring that back up later. But with that, I'm going to move to the staff report. Chris, I think you were going to go over the tour.
Yeah, I wanted to share some pictures from when we were meeting. Can you all see my screen? Yes, okay. Thank you, Chair. So after the city council information items, some of the committee members and members of the public met in front of the Civic Center Plaza and the Civic Theater. And we started off by having a short tour of the Civic Theater. Just wanted to thank Carol Wallace and Brendan Farley, pictured on the far right here, for joining us. And they'll also be in the committee soon to share some more information about that. We walked the northeast part of the perimeter, or I guess before that, here are some pictures of public and some committee members inside the theater, looking at the stage as well. We walked the northeast part of the perimeter of the 6 blocks that we've been discussing, and we saw the recent demolition of the 4th and B, former concert venue. We were also looking at the California Theater, keeping our fingers crossed on that one, hoping that that'll be next. And then we walked north and we took a look at 101 Ash. We didn't enter it for health reasons. Walked through the parkade, and then we saw the structure here where the parkade where city employees park every day, and then we headed to the city operations building, which is where DSD is located. And inside of the city operations building, we were able to go into this essentially top secret underground tunnel that connects most of the buildings. So you can see here, it connects most of the underground buildings here in the Civic Center complex. And it has stuff like the utilities and other sort of facilities that we don't really think of, and just kind of run the buildings. And we were even so lucky to have a city employee that works down there speak to us for a little bit, as you can see on the far right. So overall, it was a very fruitful walking tour, giving us an idea of what the facilities look like. And I wanted to thank Bridget, pictured here, and Rhonda and Chris McFadden for helping make that walk-in tour a reality in our facilities.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. And yes, thank you, Bridget, for being the expert that you are and helping with the tour. Do we have any requests for continuance? Hearing none, we will now take up the information agenda, which is item 1, the Urban Division Strategic Plan Update, and I'll turn it over to Brian Schoenfish with City Planning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to try sharing my screen here. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Schoenfish, Deputy Director of the Urban Division in the city's Development Services Department. Today, I'm going to give you a brief presentation on the Urban Division, who we are and what we do, and how this relates to the work that you do as a committee. Many of you probably remember the Center City Development Corporation and later Civic San Diego. Well, the Urban Division came into existence when the planning and permitting functions were transferred over from Civic San Diego to the City of San Diego in 2019. The Urban Division is focused exclusively on downtown San Diego. We are unique in that in addition to overseeing the permitting functions for downtown, we also oversee the long-range planning functions, and we have a hybrid role in which we oversee some of the infrastructure planning and project management for certain public projects in downtown San Diego, including parks and certain public right-of-way improvements. I'm now going to briefly walk you through the Urban Division Strategic Plan, which is our work program, serving as a roadmap over the next 5 years. While the work program provides our staff with guidance, it is important to note that flexibility is extremely important to address the changing conditions around us, as we have all learned over the past few years. One of the primary roles of the Urban Division is implementation of the Downtown Community Plan and zoning regulations. There's been a long history of the permitting process for development projects in downtown San Diego, serving as a model of efficiency for the city of San Diego. Part of the reason for that is having project review staff that is dedicated exclusively on projects located in downtown. Another big reason is that we are constantly looking at ways that we can improve the work that we do by implementing business process improvements, as well as regulatory reforms that can reduce permit and project review times, and to help bring projects like the one that you are all involved with here come to fruition. Downtown is also unique in that it has its own zoning code, the Center City Plan District Ordinance, which is a separate chapter in the San City's Land Development Code. Having our own zoning code allows more creativity. We can serve as a laboratory of ideas in which new programs can be developed and monitored as pilot programs to see if they could be later rolled out throughout the entire city. Downtown currently has 8 unique downtown-specific incentive programs in addition to those available citywide. Now, each year, as part of the Citywide Land Development Code update process, our staff gathers input from the public and brings forward a series of amendments to the Downtown Zoning Code to further facilitate implementation of the Downtown Community Plan. One such example of a recent amendment to Downtown Zoning Code that was adopted as part of the 2021 update and went into effect earlier this year was an amendment to the Downtown Employment Overlay Zone to allow for greater flexibility to build housing in areas once reserved exclusively for offices. This includes both new housing and the conversion of existing office buildings to housing. This change is important as it affects many of the sites that this committee is talking about as part of the Civic Center discussions today. Another priority identified in our strategic plan is to continue to look for new ways to expedite the construction of new housing that is reflective of the diversity in our city, including family-friendly, missing middle, mixed income, and affordable homes, not only downtown, but in the city's urban core communities around downtown. In the most recent demographic study of downtown San Diego, over 60% of the residents are non-families. It is important to diversify the housing supply, both in terms of income and the types of housing available, so that people from all income types and families can have the option of living in communities that are walkable, served by transit, and close to jobs and other amenities. Another item identified in the work program is what we are calling the Downtown Community Plan Refresh. This is not a wholesale update of the community plan, but rather a strategic cleanup amendment to update maps, figures, images, remove outdated references, make corrections, and incorporate the city's strategic plan goals into the community plan. As you may know, the downtown community plan was adopted in 2006 and is now over 15 years old. However, the framework, the bones of the plan are still very much relevant today. Another key role the Urban Division plays in implementing the downtown community plan is public park and infrastructure planning. As I mentioned, downtown San Diego is well positioned for significant growth over the next decade, with transformational development projects both under construction and in the planning stages. Given these major development projects that are underway, such as the effort that you are all involved with here, it is important to ensure that equal attention is given to infrastructure downtown. There are a number of exciting infrastructure projects that are currently underway, including a comprehensive system of cycleways and greenway streets, the Gaslamp Promenade, the Downtown Arts District, a revitalized children's park, and the addition of East Village Green, which will be downtown's largest park. Significant investments are being made in infrastructure right now. Investing in infrastructure at this time not only serves the community that lives here today, but it also stimulates the economy by creating jobs and investing in attracting future residents, future employees, and future visitors downtown. Now I'm going to give a quick update on the status of some of these key infrastructure projects that are currently underway. East Village Green, downtown's largest park, broke ground earlier this summer and is slated to be completed by mid-2025. Children's Park, the redevelopment of Children's Park to activate the park with a new playground, dog park, and other amenities is expected to be completed in early 2023. Development of the new North Central Square Park, located along C Street between 8th and 9th Avenues, will certainly help to activate and revitalize that area along the C Street corridor. We also have the revitalization of Amici Park in Little Italy. Both are anticipated to be developed over the next few years. We also have the new park at the corner of Broadway and Harbor Drive that is currently under development as part of IQHQ's RAD development. This park is anticipated to come online in the next 2 years. Another key infrastructure investment that the city has been making is the implementation of what we are referred to as greenway streets. These were identified as part of the 2016 Downtown Mobility Plan and serve multiple functions, including creating safe and attractive pedestrian prioritized streets that can also serve a recreational purpose as linear park corridors. Greenway streets will also help with meeting the city's climate goals by encouraging more people to get out of their cars and explore the city on foot and bicycle. Several greenway blocks have now been completed, both by the city and by private development, and several more are underway. Shifting back to the Urban Division's work program, another item that our staff will address as part of the city's annual code update process is working with community stakeholders to identify potential amendments to the gas lamp zoning regulations, known as the Gas Lamp Corridor Plan District Ordinance, which is separate from the other downtown zoning regulations contained in the Center City Plan District Ordinance. Another important item that is fundamental to the overall role of the Urban Division is to let everyone know that we are a resource to development downtown and to increase awareness of the simplified regulations and permitting process that is currently in place. Our staff is going to continue to enhance the website and develop new tools for all stakeholders to use to promote a clear and concise permitting process for projects in downtown San Diego. Speaking of which, this is a good opportunity to mention the flexible regulations currently in place as it relates to the Civic core sites that this group has been discussing. Speaking at a very high level, without really getting too much into the weeds, the downtown regulations that apply to the Civic core sites are very flexible, and there aren't many constraints related to land use, as well as density and intensity, parking and height limits. In terms of height, there are no restrictions in the zoning code. However, the maximum height for each site is determined by the FAA upon submittal to them. In terms of other regulations or constraints, as I mentioned, with the affordable housing density bonus regulations, as well as the downtown specific incentive programs that are in place, there is tremendous flexibility to achieve a variety of mixed use scenarios for these sites with very little limitation. Our staff here at the Urban Division are a resource to help address any questions that come up through this process. And I know, as Jamie mentioned at the beginning about the concerns about a frontage requirement that's currently in the code, all of these types of regulations that are in place in terms of setbacks and height and zoning and so forth can all be waived through incentives and waivers. There are plenty of incentive programs that are in place. As we move forward, we can certainly work with you to help address each and every one of those constraints that are brought up. Another important initiative that is described in our work program is what we are calling Healthy Places, which will establish the framework for partnerships with nonprofit organizations and other entities to implement cost-effective, quick impact public improvement projects throughout downtown. Now, the focus here is on small-scale placemaking type projects as opposed to the larger infrastructure projects that I mentioned earlier. Part of the vision here is to reclaim underutilized public rights-of-way, which is estimated to constitute nearly 40% of the land area in downtown, and convert portions of the right-of-way to additional pedestrian and placemaking opportunities. I know that there has been a great deal of discussion and interest relating to the C Street corridor. Now, whether the vision involves large-scale infrastructure improvements or a series of smaller-scale, quick impact projects, or a combination of both, we want to make sure that the policy and regulatory framework is in place to help make these ideas a reality. Throughout the downtown community plan and the mobility plan, as well as the streetscape guidelines, there are numerous goals and policies that support undertaking strategic streetscape improvements throughout downtown. The regulations are also already in place to support such initiatives moving forward. Speaking of resources, the Urban Division's webpage, which is on the Development Services Department site, and I will provide a link in the chat, contains all of the codes, regulations, and policies that govern development in downtown San Diego, as well as a downtown development status log, which provides information on all of the current development projects that are either under construction, are in the building permit process, or are in the discretionary process. So we do have a list that we update on a regular basis of all of those projects that is currently on our webpage. We also have a copy of our strategic plan work program that I'm going over here on our webpage as well, in addition to many other resources. And as I mentioned, we are going to continue to update all of the material that is on our webpage. So in summary, downtown San Diego is home to more than 100,000 employees and 35,000 residents, and over the past decade has experienced the creation of more housing and more covenant-restricted affordable housing than any other community in the city of San Diego. As we continue to recover from the challenges of the pandemic, Urban Division staff is busy planning for future growth by developing solutions and providing resources to make it easier to build housing, employment, and public facilities downtown. We are here to advance implementation of the downtown community plan and to help bring about the transformational change that will build back downtown San Diego stronger than ever. And we are here as a resource for you as this group moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We will now proceed with public comment. Chris?
The public comment period for this item is now open. If you have already joined the Zoom webinar online or by phone, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Members of the public who wish to provide a virtual testimony must enter the virtual queue by raising their hand before the queue closes. The queue will close when the last virtual speaker finishes speaking or 5 minutes after the queue has opened, whichever happens first. To raise your hand to speak, select the raise your hand button or press *9. Seeing no public comment at this time.
Thank you. That'll conclude public testimony then, and I'll turn it over to the committee members for questions and comments on this item. Please raise your hand and I'll let you know when it's your turn to speak. You are all a quiet group today. Normally much more.
And I just want to mention, I just placed the link to our page in the chat.
I am on my iPad today, so I'm worried I'm not seeing everybody.
So Stephen Russell here. I do have a question.
Go ahead,
A
Stephen.
comment. So, I've had the good fortune, very familiar with these buildings. I've done architectural work within CAB itself, including tours of Cobb and the top secret tunnels, as they were described, not actually top secret. Actually worked in CAB, worked in CCP, spent a lot of hours in the Civic Theater. So I'm really familiar with the buildings. I think, with regards to the report on, the urban division and the land use constraints we might have on here, I don't think I've ever been terribly worried that we couldn't design virtually anything for this core that would fit on that land. The biggest constraints I'm aware of really is that whole mechanical complex that underlies, really lays under Golden Hall, connecting those other buildings. And so the phasing of what we do is really going to be dependent, because at some point, once you touch that massive mechanical tunnel, you've rendered most of the buildings unusable. And so it just has to be a lot of thought given to the staging of when do you interrupt those services. So I think I'll just repeat, I've never thought that we could get any land use out of this that we want. The physical conditions are the most limiting constraint we have.
Thank you. So Brian, you're, for the most part, we have flexibility. We shouldn't worry about it. The items the council members brought up are fixable if needed.
Yeah, the regulations are in place, really. They're quite flexible downtown. Over the years, we've worked with the stakeholders to make sure that projects downtown can come through a relatively easy ministerial process. And when you're using any of the incentive programs that are available to you, and then including the affordable housing programs, that would certainly be a part of any project moving forward. You're able to use incentives and waivers as well to waive any of those types of requirements having to do, again, with parking setbacks, any of those constraints that may be identified in the plan district ordinance. So there's great flexibility.
Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, is there any, Brian, is there any development called out for in the master plan for the 6 blocks?
In terms of what the community plan currently has, and again, the community plan was adopted in 2006, so it did not envision necessarily a wholesale redevelopment of the sites, but the land use district for many of the sites is public civic, which allows for a mix of uses. It allows for all different types of uses. Again, there was a overlay that existed, employment overlay zone, in which specified certain amounts of development had to be employment versus residential. However, last year we proactively amended the zoning code for downtown to actually allow for that great flexibility to do an entirely 100% residential development anywhere in the employment overlay zone. So that's now on the books. So as far as the planning and regulatory framework, it's in place right now to allow for a flexibility mix of uses on these sites. It doesn't specify that a certain use has to go on a certain site anywhere within this area that we're talking about.
And there are no outer limits in terms of development?
In terms of density and intensity, there are certain base floor area ratios, but through all the incentive programs that I mentioned, and then on top of that, when you add the affordable housing density bonus, the sky's the limit in terms of intensity and density, and there is no height limit other than what the FAA puts on these properties.
Okay. And one final comment, Steve Russell, you're a good friend, but I don't think I'd ever professionally want to admit that I did architectural work on CAB.
I was trying to fix someone else's. I got to thank you. I'll just leave it at that. And I subdivided the council floor to accommodate a new council office, and I was frightened of what I saw.
And you're getting an inside look at Cobb right now, in case you're wondering.
Donna, you had your hand up for a moment. Did Jack hit what you were going to go ask?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay. I guess I'll just supplement that by asking if any of the streets in the area of this core, like B Street or C Street or one of the other streets in the area, has been designated as one of the greenway streets.
So we have certain streets that are identified in the community plan as greenway streets, and I'm looking at the map right now in front of me. It is not one of the streets that's directly adjacent to the sites that we're talking about here. However, in our greenway regulations, when we brought them forward last year as part of the 2021 code update, we did include certain regulations and certain design guidelines for the greenway streets, but we also said that any street downtown can implement these features that greenway streets have on them. So if you want to come forward and make a certain street pedestrian friendly or include any of these amenities, you can do that through the current regulations. It doesn't necessarily have to be identified as a greenway street in the plan.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
I had a question really quick. In regards to the issues related to that were brought up by the city council in regards to those other sites, was there any response by the mayor's office, or is there any thoughts on that?
Jay, this might be
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe you have put an update on the next hearing.
Yes, a couple of things. We did not make any specific comments at the council meeting. Obviously, it was an information only item, and it was new information that we were able to share with the council because, as I think we've talked about in the past, the previous information I had gotten from HCD was you couldn't include non-contiguous parcels. We've gotten updated information, so I shared that with council. No decision has been made, from the administration standpoint of whether or not to include non-contiguous parcels in there or not. Obviously, we're open to listening to what the committee's thoughts are. I will share sort of my gut is from the city's perspective, taking on 6 blocks may be adequate, plus depending what we get from the 6 blocks may dictate what we might want to ask for in some of the non-contiguous parcels. But again, that's sort of my take. I've not shared that with the mayor or gotten any direction from the mayor yet, and so forth. And maybe while I have the floor, because as Jamie mentioned, today I did get a date for the update to the city council. And so if people want to mark their calendar, if you're interested in attending, it's going to be January 10th, 2023, which is what I had asked for, sometime after the legislative recess for the holidays. Again, that's going to be information only to the council. Hopefully there's been enough work done by the committee, may not be totally done, but enough work from the committee that you can make maybe a more formal presentation as information only to the council. Staff will be prepared to make additional information available to the council. And then we're looking again for more feedback and thoughts from the council prior to going back to them probably later in January or maybe sometime in February, based on the work of this committee, with then some more formal recommendations, at least as it relates to which blocks to include in the notice of availability and to declare surplus. Is it only the 6 blocks? Is it a subset of the 6 blocks? Or does it also include some of the non-contiguous parcels?
And I would just add that the city council was aware that we adjourned so that many of us could be there. They were appreciative of the work that you are all doing. And just about each and every one of them thanked, the time and effort you're all putting into this. I just wanted to make sure you knew the city council is very aware of our efforts, and they're happy with their involvement and the mayor's office going through this process with them and with us. So,
and I did make a comment, excuse me, Jamie, I did make a comment during my presentation that, because they're wondering our overall calendar, and there are some want this done yesterday to show progress, but I made it very clear that we are not rushing this committee. And there were some council members who commented that they appreciate that. They'd rather have a good, well thought out approach than something that's rushed. So I don't want this committee to feel that you're under any time constraints within reason.
Just one
Can't
follow.
take 2 or 3 years to move forward, but I mean, obviously, if you need into January, February, or March, that's not going to be an issue.
I appreciate that. Just a follow-up question in regards to that, not to that, but what I had asked about. And it's just kind of continuing to kind of this dangle in my head. I'm trying to figure this out. So the state building not too far from there, from where we're talking from the Civic Center, is they're undergoing some type of action in regards to their space. Has there been any discussion on that, or is that part of our purview? And for the group, is that something we could consider?
We've had a number of meetings with the state, and state being both HCD as well as the Department of General Services. That is not part of this process. They have gone through their own process, although for some reason they exempt themselves from the Surplus Land Act. Go figure. But on the other hand, they are promoting housing. They have made a selection. It's the Michaels organization. They are talking about, 2 towers as it stands right now. One building being affordable housing, the 80% AMI and so forth, of mixed use, and the other tower being workforce housing, which is 80 to 120% of AMI, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That's what's on the table right now. They still have a lot of work to do. They're looking for maybe some partnership, but it's not part of this project. But just keep in mind, and they're talking right now about 1,000 housing units in their 2 towers.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Jay.
Any other questions or comments?
See, Stephen Russell has a hand up.
Thank you. Stephen, did you want to speak again?
Yes, here we are. So I guess, could we go back to, there's a mention made early, I think, Jamie, in your report about the Housing Commission needs. Are we considering, as we are looking at potential consolidation, is the staff that's in the Housing Commission building, are we looking at the possibility of incorporating them into the Civic Center, which is 1? And then 2, have we talked to Sandag about their needs for future space, and are we including their potential needs when we talk about it? Those are, I think these are open questions, but I want to make sure they get asked.
In terms of the Housing Commission, I think maybe the reference was somewhat of not necessarily co-location as much as depending on the mix of housing units and needing certificates, Section 8 certificates and so forth. Like, definitely as we move forward and depending what's being proposed, any successful development team will need to work with the Housing Commission, and of course with all the potential housing come online with Midway project, the state property and so forth. There's probably gonna be a limited amount of certificates available for maybe a high level of demand. So we'll have to work our way through that. In terms of Sandag, two comments. One is, yes, I've had conversations with Sandag, both as it relates to the potential for the central mobility hub, but we're going to move forward. As I think I mentioned when I did my one briefing, we're moving forward without that because they're going to obviously need to wait till the 2024 election to see if they get a tax measure on the ballot and if it passes, because without that, the funding for a central mobility hub is not practical. And if they are successful, I think given the progress we'll be making and what footprint they need, that conceivably could be incorporated. They've also mentioned about possibly co-locating within any new city hall structure that might get built. And it's something we'll have further conversations with them as we move along.
Thank you.
Okay, last call. And I can't see everyone, so
And
Bill, did you want
Bill,
to speak?
Yeah, yeah. I just basically want to go back to Brian real quick, and thanks, Brian, for giving us what's happening in terms of your department and the overall approach to downtown. So the question is, as this committee goes about its work, will there be an opportunity to make sure that of the things that are currently going, or the things that you're currently looking at, the projects or the kinds of things are, so that we don't get crosswise? You know what I mean? I mean, wouldn't want for this group to say, oh, well, let's move ahead and look at this, and then you come back and go, yeah, well, but within the downtown plan, we've got X, Y, or Z going. So I'm trying to get an idea of how the ongoing communication, or at least some contact, with in regards to what you're doing, and in regards to how we may be laying some things out, and some of the things that we may be laying out are, 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years down the road.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today is going over our 5-year work program that we have currently in the urban division. But as I mentioned, there's a great deal of flexibility in there as well. As conditions change, we want to be able to respond to those. And as I mentioned, we are going to be here as a resource for you. We want to make sure that we are here to have these be a part of these ongoing conversations. So whenever you have questions that come up, whether they're specific detailed questions or bigger picture questions, we are here as a resource for you to help address those questions. So we're certainly going to be here at the table to help you move forward.
And there's a full city team assigned to this. They might not be joining us at every meeting, but between Jay and Chris and others, that coordination will be happening. Okay. Well, no motion is required, as this is an information item only, and we'll now take up our working group updates. Thank you. We have 3, and I just want to thank Betsy, Steve, and Jennifer for leading these efforts, these groups. I'll just go in alphabetical order. So I'll start with Betsy.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamie. At the Downtown San Diego Partnership, we've set up a developers roundtable that meets monthly. That's parallel to this process at the city. And we've invited any of our members that want to be involved to be on that committee. We have a steering committee made up of Perry Dealey, Daniel Reeves, Gio Pasolaco, Heather Foley, Brendan Farley, Steve Cushman, Phil Rath, Abigail Buell, and Charles Black, to help guide that group as we put our agendas together to make sure we're supporting the work of this larger mayor's committee. Joel Hermosillo, who's on the call today, who's also on this committee, is also on the team of the Downtown San Diego Partnership running the City Center bid. So very important to make sure the City Center bid is supportive of what is happening here and it works with everything else going on. Kind of what Bill Ponder talked about with connecting the dots to make sure everything is connected. We did put together a charge for this committee of ours that we talked about quite a bit at our last meeting. And I want to thank Jamie Bradford's always invited to come as chair of this committee, and then Jay Goldstone, Chris Ackerman Avila, and also Brian Schoenfish. And any members of this committee can always come to our developers roundtable as well. We did have a ethics commission in writing from Sharon Spivak that allows any members of the Downtown Partnership to be involved in that developers roundtable and give feedback to both me and to Joel. And they may also be part of teams later on. So that was all through the Ethics Commission. I wanted to make very sure and clear we were following all of the city's rules and regulations as we put our developers roundtable together. Our charge is to provide community input and civic engagement in an accessible and inclusive way. So we'll actually be hosting a town hall of our members. And Tony Young is one of our board members also, and Steve Cushman. And Donna Jones is a former chair of the partnership. So we're very well represented and really happy to be part of this. So we're going to be doing a lot of community input and civic engagement. We want to give as much input to this committee and the mayor's office and the city council as possible. We're going to be providing technical guidance and input from our members to this group so that, you know, many of you are very sophisticated builders and developers also, but there's some things that might work and there's some things that might not work. And we want to make sure a project is built here. So we're very looking forward to having a real project implemented at this site. And then we can also provide industry and community feedback through information exchange and communication. So those are the things that we're most focused on. And the staff that's supporting this committee from the partnership are me and Joel. So if you have any questions for us, I'm happy to put you or any presentations you have on a parallel track over at our developers roundtable circle, just to get the maximum benefit of community input into this project. So thank you very much, Jamie.
Thanks, Betsy. It's so important that we get the downtown perspective from both business and residents. So I appreciate you and Joel leading this effort. Okay, Steve Cushman.
Thank you. I'm the thorn between two roses, between Betsy and Jennifer. Please check your email. Chris just sent you an email, which is called Final Report Framework. Our committee is Jack McGrory, myself, Mike Zucat, and Tony Young. Unfortunately, due to thanks to Microsoft, Tony got dropped from the meeting that we had, but we met last Friday. We felt very strongly that we needed to put some guardrails around the process we're going through. So in conjunction with the mayor's office, we have the document that you just received in your email. As I say, it's called the Final Report Framework, Guidance and Guardrails for Future Discussions. Most important 3 words in this document, it says draft working document, which means this is up for discussion. Please let Jamie know, or Chris know, or myself, or any of us know what your thoughts are. But we thought we needed to start narrowing the discussions, if you will. We're not saying these are all the items that this committee needs to comment on, what should be in and what should be out. There's no judgments given here as to what should be in and what should be out. But we thought we needed some kind of a document to get the discussion moved to the next level. So you'll see 5 points here. There could be 7 points. There could be 3 points. Nothing in here is meant to be set in concrete or in stone, but it's a working document. But we felt it was important to try to help the discussion move to the next level, that we needed to do this. So for now, this can be where we start. As I say, we can include all these items, not include all these items, but as the 25 of us move forward, our thought was this would set some guardrails. So we don't need to get into a long discussion today. We're happy to get into a long discussion today or not, but we just felt we needed a starting point. So that's what you have in front of you. And please give us your input, things that you think are included that shouldn't be, or things that we missed, but it was a starting point. So that's what it was meant to be. And that's what we've spent some time working on. And we've been sending it back and forth to the mayor's office for their input. So there's no fingerprints on it from that standpoint. It's just, this is the best distilled wisdom that we could come up with at this point. So Jamie, I think for today, that's probably where to leave it. Everybody just got it. It just came out. But feel free to send us your comments, your input, and we look forward to it. And we'll meet again at least once, if not twice, before our next meeting to see if we can't bring some more specificity to it. So there you are, Jamie. That's our best shot at this point in time for a draft working document. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That has certainly been a question of not only people on this group, but it came up with the city council too. What does that kind of final report look like? And so I appreciate you all trying to pull together kind of a framework that we can all review. Okay, Jennifer, the floor is now yours.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. So in some discussions with Jamie and Chris, we were describing as a studio that we were putting together some precedent studies for everyone to take a look at the history of making urban spaces, about civic spaces, about bringing the arts into civic spaces. And we realized that actually making a working group out of this was a really good idea. So we have a group, about 7 or 8 of us on this group. We're meeting likely early next week. And on the 14th, we're going to have a draft document to show you, which is primarily visual, to talk about the best, most wonderful civics projects that we know of, historically and of today. It's really exciting what we're finding. We're broadening the spectrum. We're looking big before we look small again. And we're really excited to show you some of these. And so our working committee is going to be building upon those ideas. I just attended a conference this weekend with international speakers around urban projects, urban civic projects, and then urban housing projects. And wow, I mean, amazing what's going on. And we'll share some of those projects with you, but we don't have to look really far to think about some really interesting housing. Los Angeles, San Francisco, 2 cities doing amazing things. So we'll show you some of that. But if anyone is interested in being on our working group, it's sort of starting to be called Design, Arts, and Urban Planning. We want to expand that title a little bit, but we're going to meet a couple of times over the next few months, be growing this database of really fantastic projects that intersect programming that you wouldn't expect in the civic realm. How do we bring housing into that and make it really mean something? We found a project from the 18th century that has done it well in London. So it's just amazing what we're finding. So if you want to join our group, please email me, and we're going to have a meeting in the next couple of weeks. And we'll show you just this draft document of what we're coming up with. And we think it's very aspirational. We're going to be very specific about the points that make it important and why it would be important to our city. But, you know, as an architect, this is the way I see visually, and that's what this group is going to show you. And really look forward to all 3 groups then coalescing and bringing the information together as something that we can make concrete, logical, beautiful, and aspirational at the same time.
Thank you. I agree. I think each of your expertise in the groups are important and different and will come together nicely. So again, I appreciate you all. Thank you all for doing that. Are there any questions or comments for the working groups?
I just have one quick question for Jennifer. And not that I'm making this recommendation, but I keep getting pinged by Jonathan Gluss. Is he part of your group? Or is he reached out?
No, he hasn't reached out, but that would be great.
Okay. I will put him in touch, or I'll point him in your direction.
Wonderful. And we're also going to invite some speakers to come and talk to us, some landscape architects, housing people, just to really give us the lay of the land of what's happening out there. So it might be fun for others to join those meetings too, as Betsy had recommended with hers.
And if you'd rather have him just as a speaker versus a committee member, I mean, I'll leave that up to you. I'll just let him touch base.
Okay, great.
And Jennifer, I've dropped you a chat with my email. I'd be very happy to participate in that working group as well. I think I sit at the cross section of economic development, urban design, and housing very, very comfortably.
I'm very glad that you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for our committee chairs? All right. We will now take up committee member comment. Is there any committee member comments? I imagine you would have already commented on the last item if there were. Hearing none, we'll now take up non-agenda public comment.
Actually, I have
Yeah,
a quick,
Oh, I'm
very
sorry, go
brief,
ahead.
very brief, just
I'm
because
usually better than this, but I'm on my iPad thanks to a surprise fire drill.
fun. So no, I just want to say, in so much as our role is to be out there in the community, hear input from folks out in the world. I hear from friends, if they read about the article about what's going on, not people in the housing world, that housing, solving homelessness. I mean, I'm hearing that. So the council members, I think a lot of what they're responding to is their own constituencies. I'm hearing the same thing, and I'm just throwing that out there because that's what I've been hearing lately.
Got it. Thank you. All right, non-agenda public comment. Back to you, Chris.
All righty. Non-agenda public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. The public comment period for non-agenda public comment is now open. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. To raise your hand to speak, select the raise your hand button or press *9. Members of the public who wish to provide virtual testimony must enter the virtual queue by raising their hand before the queue closes. The queue will close when the last virtual speaker finishes speaking or 5 minutes after the queue has opened, whichever happens first. When I let you know it is your turn to speak, unmute yourself by either selecting the unmute prompt that will appear on your device or by pressing *9 on your cell phone or landline. We have Chuck Kaminsky. Chuck?
Yes, thank you. I don't know if this is considered a non-agenda public comment or a response to the work group committee reports that I heard. But I do appreciate everybody's efforts on this because I think it's a very dynamic process and a project. And also, when one thinks back that the existing center is over 50 years old, hopefully the vision of what may be for the next 50 years will infiltrate each of the work groups. I do have a question about the design work group. Is the public invited to listen or participate in any of the work groups? What's the procedure for that? And I think that would be my last question of the day.
The working groups are not Brown Act required. It let us be a little bit more nimble in trying to pull everyone's schedules together and bring, get some quick meetings on the books and bring that information back to this committee, which is obviously Brown Act.
All right. And that is all of public comment.
Thank you. That concludes non-agenda public comment. Our next meeting is in person, finally.
We have one more speaker.
Oh, we do. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, my apologies. Don. Don?
Yes, this is Don Wood. Hello, several of you who I know. I kind of want to throw in my 2 cents. I know there's a lot of pressure that San Diego has what is commonly being called a homeless crisis. How much of that crisis is generated by the BIA and how much that crisis is caused by politicians, I don't know. But there seems to be a trend that if you want a picture of San Diego, it's going to be a picture of overgrown apartment complexes and condo towers. And I would like to think that the City Hall of the City of San Diego, the City Hall complex is going to be something more than that. I would suggest that you think big, that you look at the city halls and the city civic centers of the major cities in America and in other parts of the country, see what they've done, find a combination of the historic architecture and modern architecture. I lean toward historic architecture. I'm not very influenced I'm not very impressed with mid-century San Diego architecture. Think big. Take a look at the best practices of other cities, actually the best, most famous cities in the world. See what they did because their civic centers helped make them that. And if your civic center comes anywhere near what they've done with their cities, you will be remembered in history. If you put up a block of apartments and call it a civic center, people will say, well, that's San Diego for you. And like the gentleman said, stay classy, San Diego. I want in this case to be something more than classy.
Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you. Alrighty, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Our next meeting is in person, and I think it's going to be a little bit lengthier than the ones we've had so far. We will have the presentation from Jennifer and also from Carol Wallace at Civic Theater. So I just ask that you try to plan your schedules accordingly. And we will now adjourn this committee meeting to the next meeting on Monday, November 14th at 3:30 p.m. Chris will get you the location as soon as possible, but I expect it'll be in one of those Civic core buildings. Thank you all.
Bye, Jay.